Welcome to How to Run Profitable Retreats. I am Lainey Cavazos, retreat strategist and host of the show for coaches, entrepreneurs, and transformational leaders who want to design retreats that actually make money. If you've ever put your heart into a retreat only to walk away exhausted or worse, broke, you are not alone. This podcast is here to change that. Each week, I'll bring you stories, strategies, and expert insights to help you create meaningful, transformational retreats that also support your business, your lifestyle, and your bottom line. Let's make your next retreat not just powerful, but profitable. Hello, welcome back to another podcast episode of How to Run Profitable Retreats. I am your host, Lainey Cavazos, and I'm here today with Brent McCann. And Brent runs retreats for men. And I'm so excited because today we're going to have a conversation of what happens inside this retreats for men. We tend to see a lot of retreats for women out there, but what's happening in the industry is that a lot more men are looking to go into retreats. But also, I know that so many of them have never been to a retreat. And I know, Brent, that's one of your experiences that you actually get a lot of people who have never attended a retreat. And this is their first introduction to what it is. So I really wanted to have you here to inspire those of you who are men and want to run retreats for men and see what are the possibilities, what happens inside of the scenes. And of course, I would invite all of you to attend one of Brent's retreats because they're really life-changing. You'll get to hear more about this as we go through this conversation. So Brent, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Lane. It's a pleasure. This is awesome.
Yeah. So Brent, for full disclosure for everyone, just know that Brent is one of my private clients. I love him. He does such a great work. And what he has achieved in the past 8 months is incredible. And I want you to see this as a potential, as a possibility for you, right? This could be you in the next 8 months if you decide to embark in this journey of really building a profitable retreat business. So Brent, again, thank you so much for being here. I want to start with asking you this question. What is the biggest transformation and shift that you see when men come to retreats?
Oh, that's a good one. Wow, there's a few, but I think the one of so 2 weeks ago I just finished a men's retreat, and the one thing that all of them kept saying was how different their family sees them, like from pictures. Like literally, they see what they look like when they leave, and then they see what they look like when they get home, or just pictures along the way, and they're like, "Wait a second, you look totally different." And that's kind of on the external of what the transformation looks like, but it's a reflection of what's going on internally. What we focus on primarily in the beginning of the retreat is how do you calm your nervous system down? How do you get to a place where you don't have that metaphorical lion nipping at your heels in that survival mode? How do you start to live a life where you're not focused on that single point? And so when we look through that lens, guys start to relax. And when guys start to relax, they get out of this performative, gotta, show and look certain ways or act a certain way. And they just start acting as if how they truly are. And when that happens, that really creates the doorway for more transformation. One of the things that I share with the men, especially during the opening ceremony, is I say to them, like, listen, my job is to get you to the door, but I can't walk through that door for you. You have to walk through it. And so when they get to that point, and each one of them, they know when their point was to walk through that door, whether it was during breath work or going ziplining, doing some meditation, or even in the teachings portion, they know when that moment shows up. And so that transformation that's created as a result is really the most exciting thing to see. So, what we see is guys coming from high stress, lack of clarity, very confused on what's the next step in their lives, whatever that might be. And they walk out not only with the clarity, but they walk away with a sense of brotherhood where they've been seen, they've been heard, understood. And that is what really creates that transformation.
I love this. And Brett, I remember you telling me about this client who had a ranch. And there was such a massive transformation when he came to one of your retreats. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely. So this guy, he has a cattle ranch out in Oregon in the US. And it was funny because when I first talked to him, it was like, it's a fit. He should be on this retreat. And then he kind of pushed back a little bit. And his whole thing was like, I can't walk away from the ranch. That, as a rancher, you're working from sun up to sundown. And when he ended up, he was like the last guy to sign up, which was great. Like he showed up, and what he really realized throughout this was that he was holding the ranch back from actually blossoming. That by taking this time away, he was actually able to see that the ranch can operate without him. The place isn't going to catch on fire, and that he can empower the people that are working there with him to do more. And what that allowed him to do was build more capacity, whether it was have more time for himself or to focus on the real big tasks that a ranch operator should be looking at, right? So it was a really cool experience from seeing like this contracted, like, I can't do this, right? I don't know if it's going to work, to come out and say like, wow, this created more space, even though I thought I would actually feel more contracted. So that was a really, really cool experience to see him walk through.
Yeah, and I think like for me, something that really stood out right now is like he moved from rancher to rancher operator. Like he shifted his identity, and then he
Yes.
could focus on being the best version of a rancher operator that he could be.
Yeah, and that's such a big part. Like we talk about the identity because a lot of men, and I think a lot of women too, but just my focus is on men, is that we accept these roles, and these roles become part of our identity. And so when things change in life and we look back to the old patterns of what's been working, well, those patterns that worked maybe 10 years ago aren't going to be what's going to help you get to that next level. And so a lot of men at times they'll say, well, I've been doing this, but I'm not getting anywhere. It's like, well, yeah, I get it, because you're doing the same stuff and expecting different results. But what would happen if you actually slowed down enough to give yourself an opportunity to see those different results? And we saw this with Ty, the rancher. Like he was able to go at it from a different angle. And now actually, like I remember he shared with me at the beginning of the year, like last year was more profitable than it has. Like their accountant was telling them, you need to spend money because it's going to impact their taxes too much. And that's a cool problem to have, man.
Right. It's a great problem to have. Like, oh my gosh, go
Yeah,
spend more money because you made so much money. I love it. I
exactly.
think this is so
Yeah.
so important. Like, tell me, Brett, a little bit more about what is the experience for men when they're coming to their first retreat? Because I mean, as women, we kind of have a little bit more of this community, like gathering, right? Like in ours, in the way we live our lives is kind of a little bit more ingrained into who we are. So going into a retreat usually is not that much of a like a thing. Let's call it like that here with some air
Mhm.
quotes for anyone who's not watching the video. But like what is it like what you see for this men who are coming to their first retreat, right? Like from the moment when they're even thinking about it, like what are
Oh
their
yeah.
concerns and questions? And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's what's really good to know is like when I'm in, so the way I do it is through Instagram ads. And when I get DMs from guys, the first thing I do is I share what the retreat's about. I ask them how do they feel about it. Like, oh, it's good. And then I get to the point of asking them, like, what's been coming up that's got you interested in this retreat? And they share. And oftentimes, whatever they share gives me the cue as to how to approach with them, right? If a guy says, listen, I don't have a lot of friends, or I've not had a lot of friends for a long time, or I've had lower self-esteem, and I've kind of been this, that, and the other thing, then I know that I need to be a little bit more gentle in how I approach them, right? If another guy is coming in saying, listen, I've had the best career, but my career is sunsetting and I'm ready to try to figure out the next, well, cool. I have the corporate background that I can meet them where they're at. So it can be a blend. Some guys are really interested, but the truth is that every man is a little bit nervous, right? 90% of the guys that attend my retreats have never been on one before. And I've done this intentionally, that I've built this retreat with that approach so that men could feel like they could enter a space like this without feeling overwhelmed by, the options that are available. And so I used to do things where we used to meet at hotels, and that kind of worked, but there was a little bit more separation between the guys. And most recently, we started to do it at an Airbnb. And that has made a huge difference, right? Like one, it's like a huge Airbnb. It's 4,500 square feet. So, it gives the opportunity for men to be together in the common space. But then if they want to retreat back to their own space and be alone for a little bit, they can do that too. And that's really important because men want to have a little bit of that autonomy, right? Like we do like to relate, we do like to have that brotherhood, but at the same time, sometimes it can be a little bit much. So why don't we just kind of take a step back? But even before the retreat itself, right? Like once the guys sign up, a week before the retreat, we do a group call, and I call it an intentions and connections call. And it's like an hour to an hour and a half long, and it's meant to shake the jitters that men can feel going up to an unknown experience, right? They get to meet each other. They get to, put them into breakout groups. So they get to start to build that relationship. And what that does is it starts to build safety. And when they start to have that safety feeling, now they're going to start to trust the process a little bit more. So instead of, when they enter on a Wednesday night at the retreat, now we've got to try to get them to that safe space. A week before, the gears are already turning. And that creates that is created. Like I'm telling you right now, like the last retreat was the best one so far because we've integrated these things, and the ramp up for cohesion between the men was so much faster. And guys were able to experience that transformation. They were able to experience the brotherhood, the connection so much faster than it have in the past. So that's really, really a big focus of what we have.
I love it. And that, like, yeah, for everyone who's listening, like, ask yourself, what if I went to a men's retreat, right? Or if you're a woman, the question is like, do I know a man who should go to a men's retreat? Right? I think we all do.
Mm-hmm.
We definitely all do. And at the end of the day, I think it is very important to make sure that we are creating these safe spaces for men and for women where they can come and connect with others and go deeper. I mean, at the end of the day, we're still coming from that pandemic, even though it was years ago, right? There is still this desire to be in person with people, like to have real connections, right? Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, the digital world is great. That's why we're all here today, listening to this episode, but it's not everything.
Right.
Not everything. So, Brent, tell me a little bit about your retreats, because I remember one day we had this conversation and I really remember it very, like, specifically because you told me, you know what, Lainey, I saw that there were all these retreats, kind of like survival camp retreats where you had to like go hunt or sleep on huts. And, this very kind of inspired by the army or the Navy kind of like retreats, very hardcore, right? Like, let's go back to our, I don't want to say caveman times, but, like back to the origin or whatever. And then you also just saw retreats that were very towards the religious part of retreats for men. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So in my journey, I was looking for a men's retreat, and I didn't know anything. This was a couple of years ago. So I'm like, well, what do I go to? Right. And I was like, all right, I'll Google this thing. And I saw that there were men's retreats that fell basically into two camps, right? One was like you're out in the woods, you're screaming, you're chopping down trees and skinning animals and all that kind of stuff. And listen, there's nothing wrong with that, but I was in the military. I had done that kind of stuff. Not all of that, thank God, but some of it. And I don't need to do that again. And then there was more of like the faith-based, or, we're dancing under the moonlight in the middle of the night. And again, nothing wrong with that. But like what I saw were two polarities. And I thought, well, can't we get something in the middle here? And as I was looking for something in the middle, I really struggled to find it. And I thought, man, if I'm struggling to find it, then I imagine that there's other men that are struggling to find this. And, it just dawned on me in the middle of a breath work. And I remember it was like in December of a couple of years ago, and I was in a breath work and I just was sitting in the meditative part in between it. And I was like, well, hang on a second. Maybe this is the opportunity to create it. And so I took it and I ran, and I was just like, all right, well, where am I going to do this? Right. So I go back to meditation. Let me slow down the body a little bit. Let me slow down the brain, get out of the analytical mind. And all of a sudden, this thought just came of like, go to Sedona. And I was like, where the hell is Sedona? I don't even know. I had no clue, right? Like, I am a dude that lives in Western New York. Like, I don't get out west that often. And so I looked it up and I was like, wow, there's something here. And 2 weeks later, I booked a flight. I was there and I was hooked. I mean, it was, and that's really, honestly, when I get the feedback from the men, that's what they appreciate the most, is that yes, we'll do things like we go on hikes, we go zip lining. There's a little bit of that higher masculine energy, but then we also allow the space for the feminine energy to come in, where we can talk a little bit more about, what does it mean to be in our emotions without having to like do push-ups to do it, So that has been the part that's really helped, and that tells me that there's a greater need, that men are looking for this type of experience. They just don't want to fall into one extreme or the other. And that's made a huge difference within at least my retreats.
Yeah, I think this is so important. And I do have on a cell that the Global Wellness Institute that does a lot of research when it comes to wellness travel actually did mention, not this year, but the year before, that the growth on men retreats was happening, and there was so much more to come. And I think it's so important because I read a very um I was watching a reel the other day, and it was saying something about, like, why women need to learn boundaries and all this kind of things, and how communication is both sides, right? So a lot, 80% of women are currently seeking transformation. We see so many women going to retreats,
Mm.
learning how to express their emotions, learning how to manage their nervous system, learning, doing all the things. But if they have a partner and they're not on the same wavelength,
Yeah.
it's very difficult.
Hmm.
So it's basically kind of like that book that men are from Mars and women are from Venus, right? We speak differently, we hear different things.
Yeah.
Um, and it is
Yeah.
so important for us to like see that work needs to be done on both sides.
Of course. And it's such a bigger, like we're out of the era where it's like, maybe not fully, but more out of the era where it's like, you just got to be tough all of the time. And I think that makes a tremendous difference. I mean, the men that I have that join the retreats are men from all backgrounds. I mean, that's kind of what the cool part is it's not like there's one group of man that shows up at the retreat. In fact, I was just on a call with one of them, the guys that attended last week, and we were talking, and he was saying, what I never imagined was that there could be 8 guys that were from different areas, different walks of life, and yet we're still kind of all in the same boat. I was like, yeah, it makes it. And what he was saying there is that he didn't feel alone anymore. He didn't feel like he was just one out of 8 billion in the world. He now felt like he had a tribe. He had that connection. And that makes a big difference. I mean, men are looking for that. And it's crazy because like I never set out to do this. I mean, like my career was going to be in HR. I was on the path with a multinational organization. And it's just because I needed something and I couldn't find it. Then I was like, all right, well, let's pivot. Right. And so let's see what can change. Um, but yeah, so to your point though, yes, men are definitely getting more into this. And I think that there's going to be more, I'm super excited for it, more opportunities and different variations of retreats coming up for men too.
Yeah, I really like that. And I love the part of like variation. I want to just say one thing that keeps coming up to mind. So I was telling you before the call that I was on one of my clients' retreat center, right? So she's runs retreats are called come home retreats, right? And it's all about coming home to yourself. And they're beautiful, but they're inside of a ranch in Texas. So we stayed there. I think I was there for like 5 days looking at the property, right? Looking at the retreat center, see what was happening, and putting all the pieces together for this. And she lives in the ranch with her husband, and they're such a wonderful couple, right? They've been together since forever. They lived in Japan for so many years. And
Mm.
there was something that really stuck with me because uh she said, like, men want to fix things, right? She's telling me. And she's like, sometimes I don't need to be things to be fixed, I just need to be heard.
Hmm.
So and you can really tell that they have really worked in their marriage, because there were moments where she would say something, and she told me before that it was something they did, but I got to see it in action. And like, she was saying something and he just asked, do you want me to hear you or to fix it?
Hmm.
And then she said, no, just hear me. Okay. And then he heard, right? It
Yeah.
was such a great like example of like a couple that has done the work.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's cool because as much as men want to fix, they actually really want to be heard. Like that is part of the container here. Is like, and this is part of what we talk about in that opening night is like, we're not here to fix each other. Like let's let ourselves be heard. There's a lot of healing that can happen when you actually feel like you've been heard and understood without judgment. And especially from the space, I mean, there's one guy that had shared like, that he was in 8th grade. And because he put his hand on another friend of his hand, and they were 2 men, that everyone started making comments about that. And he's like, but it wasn't even anything. It was just more of like his buddy was going through a tough time and he was just being compassionate. Right.
Mm.
And so what message does that tell a young man to do in the future? Well, it's like you cannot show any sense of that space and you cannot allow yourself to be vulnerable in that. And so when we allow ourselves in a sacred space like a retreat to actually be seen and to actually be heard from that lens, just like the the woman and the husband that you were just talking about, right? Like there's something that happens, and it's I think sometimes it's a little bit more special because men, we do like to solve problems, but when we get that space to actually be seen, it's like, oh wow, there's a whole different element to experience here.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something very important, right? And I see it with a lot of like, I mean, my male friends and like family and whatnot. And there is this like deep desire to be heard. And there's not
Mhm.
so many spaces where you can do it in a place where you feel safe and you don't feel judged. So I think
Yeah.
it's great that you're putting all these retreats together and all these amazing men are coming. I know you have another retreat coming up in September in Sedona, and I know you have one in October, and then you have one in Costa Rica in January. Was it January?
In January, oh yeah, yeah,
Right?
we're hitting
I
the
mean,
ground running.
just for all of you to know that the one in Costa Rica, it's only if you've been to one of the previous retreats. Because when we talk about building retreat businesses and whatnot, there is this level, right? People are growing, they're coming to your retreats, they're getting the first taste, and then you can go deeper. So yeah, so this is exciting. So if you want to go to Costa Rica, you want to sign up for September, and
Hmm.
then you can go to Costa Rica with Brent.
Yeah, yeah, you better get moving because I got one spot left for that one. So,
Oh
you
yeah, I
know, we're
know. Oh
moving.
my God. I mean, I am just so proud of the results that you have achieved in this little amount of time. Like I can
Thank you.
really see the passion and the love and honestly the grit and the perseverance that you
Mhm.
have put into this business. And I am so honored to be in your space and to
Thank
have you
you.
as part of my world.
Yeah, well, and I just want to just pause on that for a second because when we talked 8 months ago, I was going to lose like $10,000 on a retreat, and I didn't know what the hell to do. And you showed me something within that retreat that I hosted in October last year that unpacked something for me that showed me what was possible. And now listen, for those of you that are listening, like I tried to put a retreat together in January. I tried to put one together in February. They didn't work out at all, right? Like and then it was just like some of this is trial and error, but it makes a big difference to know that I have the support of somebody like you on the background that can say like, "Hey, like let's try this." And you'll be like, "Yeah, give it a shot." And like if it doesn't work out, great, but if it does, like how do we continue to integrate that into the business model itself? So as much as yes, there's been a lot of growth, I certainly look at the relationship I have with you and how I've been able to see more things and more opportunities because I don't know what I don't know, right? So you were able to show me what I don't know without like trying to say like I'm a major mess up because it's just a learning process. So you create the space for me where I feel safe, where I feel seen and heard, and subsequently I feel empowered to do more. And now I'm looking at the fact of like I'm talking to a business partner about next year so that we can do more retreats beyond just me as the individual, but kind of co-lead and build from there. And it starts with that beautiful DM that I sent you in October of last year. So it's kind of cool to see how this all kind of grows.
Yes. So everyone who's listening here, first of all, I want to tell you that you will definitely want to be connecting with Brent. In the show notes, you're gonna have access to his Instagram that he like talks to people. So if you want to talk to him and have a
Mhm.
conversation, connect with him, definitely reach out to him on Instagram. And you'll also have the page for his upcoming retreat. So you can see if this is the right step for you. And if you are a woman and you know of a man that could really use this, right? Like you heard this and you were like, oh my gosh, yes, this is what this person really could use, send it their way because there's no bigger gift than sharing with someone like a potential or a possibility that you've seen for them, right? Because it allows them to actually feel seen. When you're like, you know what I mean? Like when you're in this space and you're like, oh my gosh, I saw this and I thought of you. Like, how do you
Mhm.
feel when someone that does that for you? Right? When
Yeah.
someone is thinking of you, you feel seen and you feel heard, you feel cared for, regardless what it is. And it's not coming from a place of like, you need to do this. No, it's like, hey, I saw this and I really thought like this would be perfect for you, right? This is the type of community you should be spending your time with. So if you have that, share it with someone because you could be changing someone's life.
Yeah. So true.
So thank you everyone for being here on our episode. And I am your host, Lainey Cavazos, and thank you so much. And I will see you all next week.